His house was demolished because he's Muslim, he says. Kalgon, Madhya Pradesh, CNN. Shahidullah Baig stands among the rubble of what was once his modest two-bedroom home, his belongings buried under debris and broken bricks. In the blink of an eye, my home was demolished, said the 45-year-old fruit seller, whose kitchen, fruit cart, and cattle shed have all been destroyed. While I stood there watching, the police just walked away. Scraps of wood, rusty metal, and garbage lined the sandy pavement outside his home, where his 4 young children play. Shahidullah Baig stands in front of his demolished home in Kargon, Madhya Pradesh. His home was one of the several properties in Kargon cities, Khoti, Mohan, Tarkis neighborhood in India's central Madhya Pradesh state, that he says were demolished by authorities following violent clashes between Hindus and Muslims that broke out on April 10th, the day of the Hindu festival Ram Navami. Authorities have defended the demolitions by saying they had acted against both the rioters and encroachers, claiming the houses and shops were built illegally on public land. But Baig and others spoken to by CNN say only Muslim homes have been targeted. Experts say the demolitions are the tip of the far deeper problem, and that this is only the latest in the string of attacks on the country's Muslim population, fueled in part by the ascendance of India's Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party. They argue that Muslims in BJP-run Madhya Pradesh have been disproportionately punished following the violence, raising fears that members of the country's largest minority religion, about 200 million of India's 1.3 billion population are Muslim, are being persecuted under the BJP. The Communist Party of India leader Priyanka Karat Center stands in front of the bulldozer during the demolition of Muslim-owned shops in New Delhi's northwest Jahanjirpuri neighborhood in New Delhi, India, Wednesday, April 20, 2022. They point to similar problems in the capital, New Delhi, where witnesses told the CNN that authorities began demolishing shops and other structures in the predominantly Muslim neighborhood of Jahanjirpuri on Wednesday, days after violent clashes between Hindus and Muslims broke out following Hanuman Jayanti, a celebration of the birthday of the Hindu god Hanuman. For Baig, there is an extra sense of injustice. Baig said he and his neighbors were nowhere near the scene of the clashes. I don't know what is happening in my country, said Baig, who says he has lived in the property for more than 30 years. But all I can say is that I'm paying the price of being a Muslim. Rubble and debris from Shahidullah Baig's destroyed home. My shops were demolished because I'm Muslim. The communal violence in Karagon erupted after groups of Hindu men carrying saffron flags, a color associated with Hinduism that has in recent years become increasingly politicized, marched through Muslim majority neighborhoods on Ram Navami, a festival that celebrates the birth of the revered Hindu god Lord Ram. Details of the clashes were disputed. Violent skirmishes between Hindus and Muslims erupted, with some men throwing stones and holding weapons in the air, according to video from local news outlets. Houses and cars were set on fire and at least one person died. A Muslim man in a clashes, state police told the reporters. A curfew was imposed in the city to fuel the violence on April 10th, and some restrictions were lifted after 11 days, they said. The government said they have set aside a cumulative sum of $131,000 for families affected by the violence. But it is the sins of the state officials bulldozing properties that gained the most attention, with activists and citizens decrying the move as unjust and unlawful. Khargon authorities demolished a property following the violence. Dr. Tamizuddin Shaikh was at home on April 11th when he received a phone call from a friend informing him that authorities were bulldozing his son's medical shop in the predominantly Muslim neighborhood of Talab Chowk in Khargon. I was stunned, said Shaikh, who says he often provided free services to impoverished and marginalized families. There was a curfew imposed in the city, and I had not been given any notice warning of any illegality. I live far away from my medical store, and with the curfew imposed, there was no way that we could go and stop the demolitions. About a dozen shops in Talab Chowk were demolished by Khargon authorities, according to Shaikh. Madhya Pradesh Home Minister Narottam Mishra described the state's actions as a form of revenge, telling reporters on April 11th, "From the homes where stones were felted, we will turn those homes to the pile of stones." He offered no proof the residents whose homes were destroyed who had linked to the violence. Shaikh said neither he nor his son were involved in the violence, and he has served the local community from that shop for more than 5 decades without an issue. He added, "I'm a respected name in Khargon, having served the people all my life," he said, but all the medicines and everything in my clinic worth about 10 lakh rupee, $13,000, turned to rubble. Muslim group Jamiat Ulama Hindu has filed a petition in India's Supreme Court arguing an intervention into the demolitions and calling them a violation of India's constitution. According to a lawyer and activist Kawar Preet Kaur, district officials cannot take the law into their own hands and cannot be the adjudicating authority. "I cannot decide who is a criminal," she said. Rahul Verma, a fellow from the Center for Policy Research, said the demolitions in Madhya Pradesh were unprecedented. It's not a job of the municipal office to give punishment to people who might be involved in stone pelling or violence, he said. Ayub Khan, a resident of the Aulangpura Square neighborhood, about 2 kilometers (1.25 miles) from Tarab Chowk, lost 7 shops when authorities demolished them a day after the violence. Khan said he lost more than $26,000 in the destruction, and now faces the daunting task of rebuilding without sufficient money. He plans to file a petition against the state official in the country's Supreme Court. Ayub Khan stands in front of his destroyed shops in Khargon, Madhya Pradesh. The demolished shops had stood there for over 70 years, and we never received a single government notice, he said. Indeed, my shops were demolished because I'm a Muslim who refused to ban the people BJP leaders. The way the district administration is targeting Muslims after the violence in Khargon, it's evident that they hate the particular community. CNN contacted the Secretary for Madhya Pradesh's Home Minister, Secretary Home Minister, Khargon's District Collector, and the police, but did not receive the response. Support for the Hindu right. Tensions between Indian Hindus and Muslims have been a flashpoint for decades, even before India gained its independence from the British. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP swept to power in 2014, promising economic reform and development, experts feared his rise could signal an ideological shift away from the nation's secular norms towards those of the Hindu nationalist state. The BJP has its root in the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, a right-wing Hindu group that counts Modi among its members and adheres to Hindutva ideology, which seeks to make India the land of the Hindus. Analysts and activists fear Modi's election would leave India's Muslim, about 40% of the country's population, vulnerable to exploitation. Policemen stand next to the partially demolished shop in the area that saw communal violence during a Hindu religious procession on Saturday in New Delhi's northwest Jahangirpuri neighborhood in New Delhi, India, Wednesday, April 20, 2022. According to Debashish Roy Chowdhury, co-author of To Kill a Democracy, India's Passage to Despotism, the demonstrable subjugation and domination of Muslims through their constant humiliation and disempowerment is central to the BJP's Hindutva project. It charges the party's Hindu right voter base as well as helps to enlist more supporters by constantly polarizing voters on the basis of religious identity through a relentless campaign of hate, he said. And according to Chowdhury, Hindu vigilant groups are increasingly allowed more leeway. Over the last 80 years, several BJP-run states have imposed new laws that critics say are rooted in Hindutva ideology. At the same time, reports of violence and hate speech against Muslims have increasingly made headlines across the country. The most controversial new laws are in the north states of Uttar Pradesh, ruled by Hindu monk turned politician Yogi Adityanath. The state has introduced laws to protect cows, an animal considered sacred to Hindus, from slaughters, and made it increasingly difficult to transport cattle. It has also introduced an anti-conversion bill which makes it harder for interfaith couples to marry or for people to convert to Islam or Christianity. More recently, the BJP ruled the southern state of Karnataka, banned Muslim girls from wearing religious headscarves in classrooms, prompting several to challenge the decision in the state's top court, a battle they ultimately lost. According to Muslim author and journalist Rhea, Muslims were made to feel like victims in their own country. From what I see in India right now, I feel for my Muslims, she said. I feel for my brother each time he goes for namaz prayers wearing a skull cap during the month of Ramadan, and the demolition of Muslim-owned properties during Ramadan, according to Ayub, is demonizing and demoralizing. It's like state authorities were doing it purposefully, she said. They are trying to tell us that during a month that is sacrosanct for Muslims, we are going to humiliate your belief and your system. The future. Baig continues to live in the small room in his home, the only one spares the demolition, which with his wife, children, and the ailing father. They have no running water or electricity. Food is running out, he says, and with his livelihood destroyed, Baig does not know how he can afford to feed his family. With temperatures touching 42 degrees Celsius, 107 degrees Fahrenheit, we are struggling to soothe our crying children, his wife, Parvin, said. Meanwhile, the Khargon district officials have posted numerous photos and videos to their official social media, showing police patrolling the streets and bulldozing more properties. Do not let harmony become divided. Read a tweet from Tuesday. Create an atmosphere of peace and harmony. But Baig believes that the very institutions in place to protect him and his family betrayed him by destroying their home. I want to ask the government, how can a man who struggled to make ends meet but feeds his family by working hard each day have the means to indulge in violent activists? Baig asked.